Corruption in Latin America is a very broad topic that dates back to the times when these territories were part of the Spanish Empire. The topic we're dealing with today is a sadly notorious and sordid case of political corruption that shook the foundations of Colombian society. Both because of the disruptive, violent, and criminal nature of the person we're going to talk about, and because of his legacy in a political and social conflict of more than 70 years that has plagued the Neo-Grenadine nation. The mere mention of his first name, Pablo, as well as his last name, causes fear, pain, horror, and even admiration, and has inspired blockbuster productions on both the small and big screen. And although today we are not going to cover his entire life, we are going to talk about a period in the life of a criminal from Rio Negro who got his start stealing vehicles and smuggling cigarettes. Later, in the midst of a spiral of violence that plunged Colombia into one of its most painful and terrible periods, he became synonymous with the sale of narcotics throughout his homeland and around the world. This is the story of the brief political career of Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. This is Reynaldo Carrillo speaking. This is the New Encyclopedia, and I invite you to follow us on our Instagram account, which you can find below this video. Pablo Escobar was a well-known dealer of illegal psychoactive substances, head of the criminal organization known as the Medellin Cartel. Ambitious and violent, he came from humble origins in the heart of rural Colombia. From a very young age, he was confronted with the injustices of Neo-Grenadine society, something that always caused him deep resentment. And he saw in the upward social mobility provided by a career in the white powder trade the opportunity to take the helm of those who would lead the destiny of his native Colombia. He also saw politics as the perfect shield for any business, legal or illegal, already being a notorious dealer of these products. He does it with the idea of starting a political career, and through the contacts provided by the vast tentacular network of this peculiar business and the corruption that penetrated all layers of Colombian society. He manages to get in touch with members of a political party that, ironically, would later denounce him. By the end of 1981, Pablo Escobar was 32 years old and was at the peak of power in the gangster world of Medellin. His empire of white powder stimulants brought him millions of dollars a week, and he had partners who helped him expand the business throughout the United States. He had it all, but his ego and ambition led him to want more. Roberto, his brother, and Gustavo, his cousin, were the ones who handled the cartel's day-to-day operations. They had helped him keep a low profile and knew that the success of the drug smuggling operation depended on not standing out too much. So when Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, drink in hand, decided to tell his partners about his political ambitions, it didn't sound convincing. Because the scrutiny that comes with a political campaign brings complications for that kind of illegal activities, but rather the total destruction of the entire operation. But Pablo, being a stubborn man after all, didn't pay attention to them and set up his political ambitions as a greater and more important desire than running the business that brought him profit, a way of life better than that of any mortal. If his work as a politician were as successful as this illegal business, he wouldn't need the latter. So he told his brother Roberto to take care of the cartel's operations, while he would focus on politics. Pablo Escobar's stimulant sales operation provided work for thousands of farmers who had no other means of support, more than growing the leaf from which this final and legal product comes. But if he got a position in the government, would he use those farmers as political capital, appealing to the populist clientelism typical of South American strongmen? Only that he would do it in a lawful way. And he didn't just want to go to Congress, he wanted to aim, even sooner or later, for the presidency. But it was in that same year, 1982, that President Ronald Reagan declared the trafficking of these illegal products a national threat to the United States. And he prepares the State Department to coordinate with other nations the proliferation of extradition treaties. As a deterrent method against the kingpins of this business, by extraditing a Colombian trafficker of this kind, he could be tried in the United States for selling these addictive products abroad, so that if the Colombian judiciary got hold of Escobar and his henchmen, they could get rid of him by sending him to the United States. But if Pablo Escobar were elected as a member of Congress, would he have parliamentary immunity? Couldn't they extradite him? And from his seat, he could legislate laws that would prevent those kinds of legal procedures. That every Colombian should be judged in Colombia, was that one of his slogans at some point? In Colombia, every member of Congress is elected with a substitute, so if the main representative can't participate in the sessions, the substitute does it for him. Pablo decides to run along with a main candidate who will get all the attention instead of him. By running for Congress as a substitute, he hardly had to campaign at all. The responsibilities fell on the main congressional candidate, and he eased the concerns of his brother and his cousin from the operations base in his cartel. Colombia has always been governed by the same groups since its colonial era. Among the poor sectors, those who voted for Pablo Escobar, these groups were looked down upon and were called the eternal oligarchies. So the drug trafficker decided to set himself apart from these elites as part of his strategy. It was the year 1982, and Escobar was a wealthy man in Medellin who dedicated huge amounts of his financial resources to social works in order to gain some political capital. He paid for the construction of soccer fields, low-cost housing in areas near landfills, covered treatments for patients with serious illnesses, and education for those who couldn't afford it. He even launched a campaign called Medellin Without Slums and fostered a kind of political social clientelism to make himself visible and hide the criminal origin of his fortune. His popularity grew a lot in that sector. That's how he managed to connect with a politician named Jaime Ortega Ramirez, who belonged to the political movement Liberal Renewal, very close to the New Liberalism, which at that time was led by names like Luis Carlos Galán. Pablo Escobar's campaign was very popular. Thousands of people would gather at the rally site hours in advance to get a spot to see him up close. When Escobar arrived, his bodyguards and other security forces would cordon off the area and display a huge banner with his slogan, "Pablo Escobar, man of the people, man of action." Next, some small children would take the stage. Escobar's niece would appear on stage and sing a song written by Escobar's mother, Emilda. This corny prelude served as the introductory act for Pablo Escobar to take the microphone. Always wearing the same outfit, tennis shoes, blue jeans, and a t-shirt that was always spotless and casual, just like any other ordinary Colombian. It was in those moments that Escobar felt so optimistic and told the crowds what he had in mind for the future. The main ideology of our movement is civic-mindedness, nationalism, and ecological social programs. And each time he kept making
more noise.
The famous magazine Semana did a profile on him. They called him a Robin Hood from Paisa. It was common to see him in the neighborhoods inaugurating sports centers, handing over houses, and more. Those who benefited from his help probably weren't curious about where all that money came from. They would understand later. It was the product of barbarism. He hired advertising experts and bribed journalists to write positive articles about him. He even founded a newspaper dedicated to promoting his image. In the end, the duo succeeds and Escobar enters Congress as an alternate deputy, thanks to an alliance between the Liberal Renewal movement and the Popular Alternative movement. The day he makes his debut in Congress, Escobar, not wearing a tie, is denied entry for not following the dress code and rules, so he pulls some tricks with his bodyguards and security to get one. So he enters mismatched, dressed in an improvised outfit that made him stand out among his fellow legislators. Because of his flashy cream-colored suit among so many gray and black jackets, and brown ones. If Escobar wanted to rise in the system, he had to be a part of it, and that wasn't a good first step. Even so, rumors about him and his real occupation were already starting to circulate in political circles, and soon also in the media circles of Colombia, There was someone who didn't buy Escobar's propaganda, and that someone was Rodrigo Lara Bonilla. The Minister of Justice of Colombia, Lara Bonilla, denounced him in Congress and suggested to the press that this peculiar new congressman named Pablo had received money from the sale of white powder. In the middle of a meeting at the Capitol, he took the opportunity to make a reference to the Paisa. I quote, "There are investigations in the United States that I cannot disclose that should be reported here tonight in the chamber about criminal actions by Dr. Ortega's substitute," declared the Minister of Justice. Lara Bonilla had information that Escobar was a high-ranking mafioso and very soon began to take action about it. That day when Escobar made his debut in Congress, his main deputy, Jairo Ortega, distributes a photocopy of a check issued to Lara Bonilla by a trafficker. As part of an argument that no one was exempt from receiving dirty money in campaigns, Escobar replied in a later press conference, "I want to inform the public that the Minister of Justice has 24 hours to present concrete evidence of the accusation he made against me." 39 days later, on the front page of El Espectador newspaper, there appears a photo of Pablo Escobar's first arrest, years earlier, for issues related to smuggling white powder, a report that destroyed the entire narrative that he and his advisors spent almost a year building to get him into Congress, as well as the story about the death of 2 agents from the Administrative Department of Security. The United States, in fact, had him in their sights. By September of 1983, the American authorities canceled his tourist visa, and the Drug Enforcement Administration officially labeled him as a trafficker. In light of those scandalous events which put the public eye on him, Pablo Escobar's brief political career began to fall apart. Lara Bonilla asked Congress to revoke Pablo Escobar's parliamentary immunity, which led to an investigation against him. His properties were seized, his accounts were frozen, and he was fined. From being a congressman, he became someone under investigation for drug smuggling. On January 20th, 1984, the boss announced his retirement from politics after this avalanche of accusations. He would no longer belong to the liberal renewal movement. For Escobar, all of this was a humiliation and the last straw. In what would later become the worst wave of violence Colombia had seen in a long time. With his political ambitions and the legal path closed, Pablo Escobar would fully surrender himself to mafia barbarism. April 30th, 1984. Escobar orders the killing of Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, thus beginning an armed conflict for years in Colombia, which would disturb the peace of hundreds of thousands of Colombians. They also caused the death of the director of the newspaper El Espectador. And in the following years, they ended the lives of hundreds of judges, police officers, prosecutors, and countless civilians. In what would be Pablo Escobar's revenge after being ousted from the legislature, revenge accompanied by kidnappings, extortion, and car bombs, Pablo Escobar may have retired as a politician, but not from politics. Through bribery, extortion, and intimidation, he continued to manipulate high-profile politicians to act in his interests. Exiled from institutional life, constantly escaping police operations, and expanding his psychoactive substances business even further, his violent actions would disrupt the stability of the Colombian Republic and would end with the death of this violent kingpin on December 2nd, 1993. Thank you all very much for watching this video. If you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments, your thoughts, your suggestions like this and all the other videos, and hit the bell so you get notifications for all our posts. And of course, follow us on our Instagram account, where we post additional material related to everything we do on this channel. See you in the next episode, and take good care of yourselves.